I spent the last 5 months looking over the book of Genesis to get a better understanding of what God wants to tell us and learn what the book has to offer. Since I've reached the end of the book in terms of things I can teach, I'm now going to take a moment to look back at what I've learned and see if my own perception of God has changed. To be honest, it's been a long time and far more work than I originally anticipated. Once this just goes to show that it's no easy task to understand God. So, what have I learned? 1. The Bible, as I predicted, isn't well written. This was sort of predicted, since the first two chapters alone point that out by being practical replicas of each other. Since both say the world was made in different orders, it's obvious that it's not meant to be taken literally. However, later on, I came across a number of stories that make some literal sense and goes against my original assessment that Genesis was mostly visions and oral stories. Whilst the latter category shouldn't be taken literally and must allow some artistic license or fantastic descriptions, such as the creation, the flood, and the Tower of Babel. Much of the rest of the book consists of seemingly drab accounts of events and limited use of description. Whilst in chapter 9, the flood is said to rise higher than the mountains, in chapter 37, the ornate robe doesn't even have a proper description, and a wide array of translations leave little to no clue as to its actual appearance. And another example of this is in chapter 4, where Cain was said to have lured Abel away, attacked, and killed him with the appropriate build up and payoff. The opposite of this is in chapter 32, where Jacob is left alone and is suddenly wrestling with someone, with no warning, no build up, and no explanation afterwards. The first can be given as a straightforward narrative and has all it needs to show what to explain itself, the situation, the reaction, and the consequence. The second lacks that and shows it's merely an account, since no bard would fail to give any storied information about the fight or its consequences, not even suggesting it was a dream and still having the injuries from the fight. So there's certainly a lot more to that book than I originally expected. So many people make assumptions about the text, where nothing is clearly stated. The classic example I like to give for this is chapter 19, where Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed because of the homosexuals in the cities. This, however, is a massive assumption, since the outcry was heard against Sodom, and Gomorrah isn't mentioned until the event itself, and the sin is never mentioned. Furthermore, context given within the previous chapter suggests that the sin wasn't homosexuality, but lack of hospitality and a gang rape culture. Many more point out that the story of the Ark in chapter 9 is ridiculous due to the number of animals required to be on the Ark. This can be seen as taking every animal literally. But since it doesn't say every animal on Earth, or even give us a list of animals, it's very unlikely they was meant to be taken literally. Therefore, it makes more sense that it was the animals in the local area, which would have included the classic menagerie of animals we'd expect, and therefore the ones that would have turned up in the picture book quite easily, such as lions, giraffes, camels, leopards, foxes, and other exotic creatures in the Mesopotamian area. Sadly, that would not have included penguins, kangaroos, or polar bears, and certainly no unicorns. People make these assumptions all the time, and it doesn't get the message across. It only serves to confuse people and give ammunition to those who just want to knock down the efficacy of the Bible. Thirdly, the ages of the patriarchs aren't necessarily exaggerations. I don't just go by my own studies for this. If I find videos on YouTube that cover the things I'm looking at, I take inspiration from them. In this case, I saw this long after I did the video on the patriarchs. They mentioned that the ages and the genealogies of Genesis were potentially given as the perfect numbers of the patriarchs, not necessarily their ages. I'm not entirely sure what it means by perfect numbers, and I'm not a big fan of arithmancy. So I'll try to link the video in the description below. I remember he talked about how the different genealogies, such as from Cain to Noah, and from Noah to Abraham, reflect different perspectives on the perfect whole numbers, how it applies to the biblical patriarchs, and how that is completely different from the set linear line of the kings of Israel. This makes sense, and it makes it interesting to look at, so I recommend checking out that video, and if you can, give me a minute. I'll say here that I'm still skeptical about the timeline, even with the ages considered, since the term fathers and sons get thrown around a lot. The literal translation should be ancestor or descendant. This makes sense considering Jacob uses the term fathers to mean both Isaac and Abraham. So it's likely the same could have been used for the others as well. I haven't checked that at this stage. Certainly will for later videos. 4. There is far more to this book than I'm able to cover in detail. I was discussing this very problem with a friend, and we agreed it's sort of like a catch-22 situation. We could either spend forever studying the Bible in detail, or we can skim over it and get it done quickly, but miss many important bits that we can learn so much from. I started this project in August, and I've only just got to this point in January. If this doesn't demonstrate how much there is, I don't know what will. I will admit I have been less than high speed about it, considering I had a couple of extra videos to post on certain days, and due to still having a day job, I can't always get the time to study, write my essays, record, and edit before the week has run its course, and I may as well move on to the next week. That being said, that again shows that whilst we have our busy lives, we can still make time for God. 5. An alarming number of things match up with scientifically confirmed observations. The order of the creation story in chapter 1 is a classic that I often give as an example. The fact that, in terms of order, the events actually make sense with the scientific timeline, if not the time scale given. But there are some more surprising things that have cropped up in my studies that, quite frankly, have blown my mind, and I just couldn't wait to share. These include that the firmament is probably referring to the magnetosphere. The flood could have happened, as described, with the rains as well. The Tower of Babel could have been as described, and the region where Sodom and Gomorrah were was on a volcanic fault. All of these imply there is more to the Bible than just a few random general stories wrapped up in a fancy cover. There's actual evidence for them, and even if some evidence might be loose speculation, when you compare it to the stories, it makes sense. 6. Some deeper meanings have been glossed over. It could be that I delved into the Bible incredibly deeply and I'm just looking at all manner of interesting things. But some of these things are remarkably profound and can add a whole new layer to the biblical message if people can be bothered to mention them. They can include Eve was most likely present in the garden with Adam and wasn't noticed by him until she was taken by God. The original sin probably wasn't disobedience but blaming others. Very few of the patriarchs were perfect. The men of Sodom must have had their wives. Jacob wasn't married to all the women he sired children from. And the wicked act of Onan and were most likely linked to sexually transmitted diseases. In short, many things that, to me, seem plain to see when given time to look over and given the patience to look at, are so often ignored in favour of the bigger, more glaring ideas that seem to take over the narrative in some people's eyes. Just because something is so big that you think it's more important doesn't mean that the details don't matter. Far from it. If you look at, say, the Earth, you think it's a great big green green marble. But you look at the details of it, like us, you find we are causing a bigger effect on the Earth than some people might realize. 7. There is a long way to go. As I said, it's taken me 5 to 6 months with my other projects to get to where I am right now. And there's only one book in the Old Testament alone. I've got the rest of the Bible to go. And at this rate, I'm still going to be going in 30 years' time. I could readjust my style to allow for this and take the books on a broader level. But what I learn from this? Yes, I've skipped over many parts of Abraham's story in order to get to the rest of the book. But there are videos aplenty on his covenants and his sons, so I saw little reason to add another. Yes, the same thought process can be applied to my channel as a whole, but I'm trying to present something different than what most people are. You could say unique perspective, but who knows, I may end up just rehashing over stuff before. I'm going to hold my hands up and say my channel is not doing as well as many others, according to the analytics. But I'm not overly worried about that. I'm not aspiring to be like other channels. I'm just putting out my own content and building up my own knowledge at the same time. It's sort of a library for me. I'm not a professor who has branched out into YouTube, but an everyday guy who is just sharing his faith and understanding with the world. Yes, other channels are doing similar things, but I'm trying to take a different perspective. And since I'm still doing a day job, this has been a way of getting close to God. Since the lockdown, I've been using this as my weekly devotion of sorts. I start sort of late in the week, doing my studies, write the essay, record it, and then spend the rest of the week doing the editing to put onto YouTube by Sunday. Yes, many churches are beginning to open up across the UK, but my local parish has a high risk congregation, so our church isn't likely to open until this pandemic is well and truly over. As a result, I've been able to find a purpose beyond just going to work, coming home, and watching rubbish on telly. Even my work in the forge, after many a day at work, gives me my creative side. And I still occasionally have discussions. Ultimately, I'm still learning. Sooner or later, I'm going to say something that I'll have to retract or apologise for. That's life. You live and learn. If you are the sort of person who's interested in learning along these lines and developing your understanding of the Bible for any purpose, then subscribing is a great way of showing your support for the channel and getting alerts when the next video lands. I can't guarantee a video every week, like I said, I'm still working, but I am trying to keep it consistent. It doesn't matter if you don't agree with me. In fact, if you wish to start discussion in the comments, please do so. I only ask that you remain civil. In fact, if you really want to put the cat amongst the pigeons, so to speak, then share the videos with people who might find them unorthodox and see what happens. Either way, I would like to see us make this year a bit better than the one before. Thank you for watching, if indeed you still are. Please show your support for the channel in any way you feel is necessary. And until next time, stay safe, and God be with you, my friends.